GIS presentation?
I hope not. I'm going to try to stick to my 10 minutes. Okay, so I guess it's my turn. We have been talking about GIS, I think, since the day I started, and we finally had a chance to give a bit of an update to everyone about where we're at and where we're going. So just to get the nomenclature out of the way, GIS stands for Geographical Information Systems, and in its simplest format, it's an ability to do asset documentation and setting that to mapped coordinates. So making it graphical in nature on a map itself. And an asset can be anything from a manhole to a sidewalk to land use, zoning, easements, roads, etc. It's anything that would, for the town, would be a piece of infrastructure. And we know we have thousands and thousands of points of data representing the town's infrastructure. So just what people really look, when they say GIS, they think of these types of maps. And we'll kind of focus, to the right is one of our street lighting districts. In the center kind of shows some of our sanitary system, and then to the far left, which is a little harder to read, is some easements over top of where we might have some infrastructure that we need access to. So really, behind this is a lot of information that when you click on any one of these points, either now or into the future, will tell you more about what maybe is going on. So for example, in the lighting district, we might find, if we click on one of those red dots, we find information about the luminaire, when it was replaced, what year it was installed, etc. And representative information about other types of assets as well would show up either with your sewer, your roadway, or even your easements. So just to talk about who uses this information, and it's really a wide swath of individuals and people. It starts anywhere from any of the town departments. Probably the most specific would be engineering, highway, sewer, and planning, but also our consultants, the builders, and their consultants, as well as the general public. It's a repository, if you will, of information that shows our built infrastructure, and many organizations and people are interested in what that is. From a general public perspective, a lot of times they will want to know, they will want to click on their piece of property, and they may want to understand what that easement is that's on that property, or they may have a manhole, they want to understand what that manhole might be, or we will use it as a larger tool to help us do assessments, if you will, and maybe we think about where we have sidewalk systems, where we don't have sidewalk systems, and where we maybe put those in the future, as some examples. So our GIS, we know that it's got a lot of information in it. We also have come to the realization that it's probably got a lot of duplicate data in it. And unfortunately, it's not been updated significantly, I would say, for a while. And at that point, what this does is it makes it an unreliable tool for us. And this really became very apparent to Mark and I when we were during our EPA audit, and one of the questions that the EPA asked us was, how many stormwater outfalls do you have? And we said confidently, 638. Is it close? And they looked at us and they said, 638? That's a lot for a town your size. And we said, well, that's what we felt confident that's what our GIS was telling us. And they said, So one of the comments that came back is, you might want to check into that. So we did, and what we come to realize with our base is that really we have maybe half of that. We're not even sure if that's the right number yet, but that we had a lot of duplicate information. And then as we started getting down into it, we're like, ooh, some other things just weren't looking right to us. And as we start reaching out to highway and sewer, we start to find out that maybe some information isn't mapped correctly. And so the audit really became, I would say, our little canary in the mine that we've got a bigger issue here that we need to deal with. So how did we get here? Well, I think the simplest way I can frame it is just a lack of consistency. We've had several staffing changes. There have been priorities and changes in focus. We've not maybe been consistent with updating as we should have been. And really what you find is when you're building out the GIS, you want to have a very structured database, layering system, if you will. And you want to make sure you have protocols and standard operating procedures in place so that the information is going into the GIS consistently, so that we know how to get it back out. So what's our plan? Well, we kind of came up with a 3-phase plan, and the first phase was really a get our head around it type of phase, and this was our discovery phase. And it began shortly after we had our GIS technician leave for other opportunities, and Mark Stein, our assistant town engineer, he took the lead to jump into it and really figure out what's going on. And at that point we started to get a sense, as I mentioned, about the unreliability on some of the issues that we have with the data with GIS. But to be fair, we really don't, neither Mark nor I have the expertise in GIS, and honestly we didn't have the bandwidth to dig into it. We also thought to ourselves, well, then this is an opportunity for us to go hire, and what we found is hiring is challenging in this market, especially in this area, in this skill set. And really what we were hoping to look for in a hire would be an entry to mid-range level type of individual, someone that's got 3 years of experience. But we found that bringing that person in, given the condition of our GIS, was not going to be real valuable to the town. You really need to have a better established tool, if you will, in place before you bring somebody in and then run with it. So we engaged with a company called Innovative Contracting Services, and I'll talk about them a little bit later here. But they are essentially a data management company. They take digital information and organize it and put it into a format that is useful to the end users. And we'll talk about some of their experience here later on. But as a result of this discovery phase, and with the help of ICS, we actually were able to come up with an approach, a rational approach to updating GIS. So that gets us into phase 1. And this is where we're currently at today. This is what I'll call the heavy lift. This is where we're going to work through our ICS and have us, we'll be confirming end user access, their needs. We need to reestablish our GIS structure. Again, we need to look at our data. We need to figure out what needs to be consolidated, what needs to be deleted, and what kind of reconciliation we need to do with the accuracy of it. Get our protocols in place for adding new information and standardizing that. And then as part of this phase, we also expect to expand our GIS and update it using these new protocols. But what we believe will happen is, and what our Venn diagram is showing, is that we think we're going to be, it will take us 2, 3, 4 passes through this process to really refine and get ourselves to a place that we feel comfortable that we've got a good approach to getting our GIS updated and keeping it updated. Because at this point, it's in a bit of disrepair. And then finally, phase 2 is sort of the long range, the long out into the future. And this is, at this point, we're going to have a GIS base by the time we get to this phase that we feel comfortable in. We actually will feel comfortable enough to make it available to the public for their use, which is a large goal of ours. And we'll make a determination at that time if we're ready for hiring a GIS technician or if it makes better financial sense to outsource it. But that is a to be determined moment for us once we get to a good spot within phase 1. So a little bit about ICS. Like I said, we've been working with them as part of the discovery phase. This is a quote taken straight out of some of their literature, and I think it really does summarize what we are trying to accomplish in generic terms, and then specifically for our GIS. And they have a background where what kind of intrigued us about them is they do a lot of utility work. So a lot of it's documentation for utilities. So Avangrid is one of their big customers, and they've had to take, it sounds like, a monumental amount of information and do exactly what we're looking for them to do for us here in the town of Webster. So through the discovery phase where they did their, kind of gave us a high-level understanding of what we've got going on, where they think that we could make improvements. They helped us pull together an approach to make this happen, and that approach is part of the proposal or contract, if you will, for phase 1, which I believe tonight we have a resolution on the town board for the supervisor to sign that. We feel that this will have a completed phase 1 by midsummer. Now, all said and done, there's about between 90 days, around 90 days of actual work, but midsummer is longer than that. But given vacations and the needs for them to produce information for us to review, give them feedback, and kind of go back and forth through that iterative process, we'll be out into midsummer. Additionally, as we are bringing more of this database, this GIS online and getting it finalized, we'll be reaching out to other departments and making sure that, hey, this is how we're taking it. Is this what you're looking for? And also wanting to understand what is it that they have in their files, whether they're hard files or digital, that we can start chewing on and incorporating into this. So, like I said, we're targeting a midsummer of this year to get us to that point. And I know one of the questions that came through from Patty was who would be the project manager on this, and I will tell you that Mark Stein will be the project manager. So he will be the day-to-day individual who will have constant contact with ICS and our departments and making this happen.
Have we ever looked into the grant for this?
A grant?
Yeah, for this project?
No.
I believe there's something out there for, municipalities, that if we could look into it.
Okay. We can.
That would help.
Yeah. We could look into a grant. I would say that would delay us moving forward with this project, since we do not have a grant in place for it.
But have we ever looked into it before we pursue this
We
project?
do not.
Quick question is, were any of the other departments involved in the selection of GIS?
For other departments?
Yes.
No. GIS sits with the engineering department, So we took the lead on,
So there was no collaboration with sewer or highway with respect to this decision? Because I know they probably should be involved, at least on the other side, right?
and they will be, yes.
So with respect to, because I know we've been talking about GIS for years now, and I know we did have somebody on working with GIS, and which is why I'm a little alarmed that we have so much duplication in the system. If we had someone dedicated to it, I don't know whether there weren't protocols established back then, or where the other departments weren't involved. But hopefully going forward, Mark, we'll put those protocols in place and involve the other departments so we don't have the overlap or, duplication of information.
I know that within their proposal, what we've talked about, and our end goal is to have basically an SOP on how, from the beginning, how to put a TIF file into the system and how to have it managed for years to come is part of this process. So when something, myself steps in, we could pull that out and be like, oh, we're ready to go with this.
So they're gonna have to, I take it they're gonna have to go in and clear out the duplication and all that first. I would imagine it would take some time, correct?
That's a good portion of the time here, yes.
So-
And if we find that what we'll have to do is until we get actually into physically doing some of that as well as doing some of the updating is when we'll figure out maybe how much of that has to be completely cleared out.
Would you be repairing the existing systems or scrapping them all together and replacing them?
My expectation is it's more of a repair than a scrap, but I can't say that there would not be some wholesale removal and update.
Would it be possible to set some sort of dates to give feedback to the town board as part of your process?
Yeah, absolutely.
I'd like to, yeah, 'cause we're talking midsummer, I would like, hopefully we can have an update at least once a month.
Okay. We can do that.
And if you could look into the grants too. I mean, I would like to, if you want to, I would like to, speak with you if you would like, and to see what the option out there for us. Because I know with Monroe County Women-Owned Business Enterprise, we just got a grant for the, our clerk department, through that. So therefore, I know there's grants out there for municipality or any, studies to improve the town.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. No,
I would
absolutely.
glad to help.
Okay, great. And I will actually, tomorrow I'll reach out to Maria in our office as well and have her also start with our grant consultant as well.
Can I, Josh, you and I kind of ran into this in mid-2020 on basically what has happened in the last 10 years on GIS in town. We did have a person that's main job was to do GIS, to take as-built and input it into whatever computer system so we know where these pipes are and all this stuff. But that person also was working in another department, I think, building inspection or code compliance.
Correct.
And once we started to peel back the onion of their workflow after their boss no longer was with us, the DPW commissioner, we figured out pretty quickly that that person liked doing building inspections more than GIS.
Did you know that sometimes there's things you do at your job that you don't like, Kyle?
So that kind of led us to see that really there hadn't been any GIS work done for years. I shouldn't say any, but very minimal. And one of the things we found during that process is that we had a retainer, and I'm not positive, but I think it was with MRV, to assist our GIS person And I think in the budget annually from 2016 up through 2020, it was $15,000 or $20,000. So that the town board and DPW knew that that was important, that we needed to not only have somebody who was a very high-paid individual, may I say, W-2, but also to give that person $15,000 to $20,000, you know, of a firm to help on that. And we looked at those 5 years of budgets, and it ended up, I guess it's good news, I don't think it is, that we spent about $1,000 to $2,000 a year, which you could say, isn't that great? We came way in under budget. What it meant was we didn't utilize MRB, so we had a guy that was doing building inspections instead of GIS, and that guy had no, and his boss had no desire to interact with MRB. So this is what we had. At that time, I mean, I didn't know what GIS was, but pretty quickly you start to figure out, and I think from the presentation tonight, everybody, the page that has the pictures of the lighting district and all of those things, just to show you how this affects us every single day. And why it's so important to have this mapping and know where this stuff is. And be able to click on it and know how old it is, and maybe plan for the future on when that's going to have to be replaced. I mean, that's master's degree in GIS. We don't have a GED yet. It just happened today, didn't it, Art?
Absolutely.
All right, Art calls me, and I don't want to steal your thunder for when you present, but when Art calls me and says, "Well, it happened again, Tom. We're going along on a project, and boom, we hit an 8-inch lateral pipe that we don't have in our GIS system, so we don't know it's there." I can't tell you how many times over the last 5+ years that I've been a supervisor that I get calls from highway or building or whatever, that they now have come across something that we didn't know was there. And I'm going to tell you right now how much that costs when all of a sudden we got to go and do kind of whatever. I'll tell you that cost a lot more than had we back in 2015 to 2021 had somebody or a firm that was dedicated to updating this stuff. But that's water under the bridge. That's gone. I have an idea why we have duplicate stuff. I'm not going to get into that right now, and it's speculation at best. I'm just excited at the fact, and I want to thank Mark, and I want to thank Keith, because I think they saw immediately, like, this is a major problem. Penfield, they have on their website an interactive thing for their citizens to go on and see where stuff is. That's where we should be at. We are a socioeconomic town. We should be at that point. But to Keith's point, we're at phase 0, 1, 2, 3. We got to crawl, walk, run. So I want to thank you. I'll get off my soapbox. I'm all for this. I love the fact that we'll get monthly updates on this, and I can't wait to roll into phase 1 or 2 or whatever, what we're going to do next, because we have to put the foot on the gas of this thing, or we're going to continue to have problems. We don't know our infrastructure. We don't know how old pipes are. We don't know what that lighting system is. We don't know any of that stuff. How can you run an organization that way? So I got nobody to blame but myself, because I've been running this organization for over 5 years. So the buck stops here.
Can I steal your thunder? So
Yeah.
our department, we see and review every stakeout that comes in for Webster. So
Can you use the microphone, please?
So we review every stakeout that comes into the town of Webster, and we have to review it and act on it. So I saw this on the agenda. In the last 10 days, which was pretty light, we had 251 stakeouts come in. For each and every one of those, we have to go to GIS. And we go through it throughout the day. If nothing's on GIS, then we have to go out there and manually look for it. So what Mark and Keith are doing impacts us greatly, and we're looking forward to having an accurate system.
I agree, it's important, but to John's point, I do think it's important to have stakeholder input along the way before moving forward with a plan, because if they don't have input to it, how do you know you're contracting for the right things?
And the stakeholders are?
highway, the people who will use it, highway, sewer, I mean, clearly engineering's working on it. Josh in community development, I don't know if you had input into the selection here?
Yeah, I was involved in the initial conversations with ICS.
The only other, I guess, point or question I would make is that while we're going through this process, we should probably make a determination whether we're going to hire a GIS person or we're going to outsource it, so that when this report comes through, we are ready to move forward. We don't have to spend another 2 months deciding if we're going to hire someone or not. Sort of chewing gum and walking at the same time.
I will say that because, in hindsight, I would have had Pat Stevens here tonight and Brayton Connor, because Brayton and Keith and I, on the W-2 employee, did a lot of calisthenics and found that because of the hiring market and because of the specialization of this skill, we were having a really hard time. And maybe the job market will change from when we were doing that. And that made us kind of change the way we looked at this and said, and it really, as Mark got deeper into it, you said, really, we don't need a person right now. We need a specialist to come in and kind of straighten this out and get us at, whatever. Then, as I think I understood you said in this presentation, and it's written in there, as we go into the next phase, that's when you start to determine, you go out and hire somebody, and the world's fluid. I don't know, maybe these tariffs will make everybody lose their jobs, and there'll be just a ton of people out in the job market in 3 months looking for GIS specialty jobs. Was that the case when Brayton, you and I were doing this back in the fall? Yeah, that can change, the world's fluid. So we could hire a W-2 person, right? If it stays static, like it was back in the fall, my bet is that we're going to be hiring a firm. But we'll see. I'll reserve judgment.
To caveat, we could, the level, the FTE, full-time employee that we would try to hire for, equivalent to a salary of, say, $69,000, was not readily available.
Yeah.
I understand that, and I remember that, and I remember the search, and I remember Braden actually boosted a listing, paid a little more to get it out there and really try to find somebody. So I agree, it's extraordinarily important to have this and update this data for all of the reasons you mentioned, and there's probably a handful more. Art, were you involved at all in the input as a stakeholder for this data and what your requirements would be?
I was not, however, I've worked with Josh in the past on previous projects like this, and I trust these individuals to at least get us off the ground to a place where we can then come together and discuss what we need.
I think that's an important fact to bring up is with stakeholders, we're not excluding them, we're just not ready for them yet. It's like we need to get the system correct and ready, and then we go to Art and we go to Pat, and like, okay, what are your issues on this? Now that it's working and we can input what we need to input, change what we need to change, we're ready to run. Instead of, I know what your issues are. When I toured the facility the first time, I'm like, well, this will be on GIS, I'll just look at it when I get back to it. You won't find it on GIS. How is this not on GIS? Like, it blew my mind.
This could very well be a situation where less is more.
Okay, fair, that's a fair point. My other question is, what other firms were considered for this work?
So as part of the initial phase 0, we had Day Engineering. They were about double the price. And we have our billing rates for MRD.
Do we have a budget that we set aside for this project, correct?
There is, yeah.
Okay, but we don't know, right now that you you know, we're gonna like hiring a firm or anything like that. We don't know how much it's gonna be. So the cost is gonna be,
It's a not to exceed of 69.3 for this space.
Which is within the budget.
well, it would be nice if we could, you know, look into just a little bit of the grant, that would, anything that we can get, you know, that would help our taxpayer too as well.